answers he has for the financial crisis that's going on.
We have this perfect storm that seems to be brewing here. One is the war cycle, and 2014, the cycle starts turning up again. Extreme hostility developing around the world, and every time that cycle has hit, we got World War I, World War II, so I think there's going to be fertile ground for putting a spin on anything when that war cycle begins to turn up in 2014. War tends to erupt largely from an economic perspective. The more governments are in trouble, the more they can't pay their debts, and off it begins to go. Every time you get something that turns down like this, you get separatist movements. That is also the possibility of Europe eventually breaking up. 2016, we begin to see a third party begin to rise. You have the natives against the immigrants that are coming in. It's always the same patterns that come up. After 2015, there's probably going to be the real crisis in confidence on a global scale. We see the assets beginning to rise, going into that peak there in October 2015.7. The debt crisis then becomes much more critical in 2016 going into 2020. And then you're going to start seeing the rates rise, because then the banks are going to have to start to bid because they're going to need money. And as the money begins to flow out of the banks, then you're going to see the rates start to take off. With rates that's so low, just a small uptick in rates, you're creating these interest expenditures that are just going to take off like a rocket ship. So we have to eliminate by law that government cannot borrow money, period. Because once they start borrowing, the end is there. That's it. Why are you borrowing? You really intend to pay it back? And they just look at you like, boy, that's a dumb question. Of course not. It's effectively back to where we were with the 1860s. We're now issuing money that just pays interest. The same as it began. There's no difference. But we're graced with idiots, that's all I can tell you. When Europe is basically getting worse and worse in Japan, then the capital comes here. It then forces the dollar up. If they're going to fear a collapse in Europe, it's going to move in different places. This is how it does. So history, honestly, is really just a roadmap to the future. You really need to be Nostradamus or something. I mean, you just really just look at what they did before, and it's sure enough, they always do the same thing. I have